Yep, for anybody that missed it, go ahead and scan that QR code. That's there to answer that question that we asked the first day. How many years of experience are in the room? The fleet managers. Melissa put together that quick poll. So this is going to test your technical abilities. So this is question 1. So what's the other conference that's starting this morning? Oil and gas? We may have guys that I saw, they had similar vendors over there. They may be wandering over there, looking for handouts. Hey, Howard. I'm going to let you go ahead and make your announcement, and then we'll make an announcement. I think we're slowly getting folks trickling in, so.
All right, so I didn't have anything real big. I just wanted to kind of thank everybody for coming and sharing the information. I always take a lot of stuff back from these things, the information I share from everyone that participates. And I think it's really good, the information that we're sharing. It's helped improve my program coming to these things on our end. So thank everyone that came. A couple other appreciations. Robert in the Fedora here. He was the one that coordinated all the transportation and the entertainment on our event night. So he put all that together, worked with Patty to make it all happen. And I definitely want to throw a huge thanks out to Patty, Inger, Kathy, and Darlene, because they were the ones that did the huge lift to make all of this happen. We just kind of threw the ideas, and they were like, yeah, we can do that. They did all the contracts. They did all the coordinating flights and everything like that. So definitely give a big thanks to them.
Yep.
Yeah, so if you host these things, that's your saving grace is that group right there, that's for sure. One last thing I had, we kind of talked a couple things about the Coleman. There were questions, so we found a few things out. So Robert looked up and found out one thing, that Coleman was 25, was founded and their headquarters was in Omaha, Nebraska. And then they actually manufactured the trucks here in Littleton, Colorado.
Really?
So, yeah, that I didn't realize that until he looked it up.
They use a Buddha model GL.
Yeah, the Buddha model GL engine. Yeah. So.
Did they build the engine?
I couldn't get that information, so I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Buddha.
Yeah, they use that in partnership.
Yeah. So then the last question that came on there, the ring gear in the front, and it's not a step. It did belong on the rear wheel. They moved it to the front because those wheels were in better shape for the front, but it actually was supposed to be on the rear wheel with that gear to drive implements in the back of the truck by, chain drive in the back of the truck. So I think that's kind of the few things I just wanted to throw out there that we found out in between, and then the huge thanks.
Yep. Well, thanks, Howard. And, Colorado's been an awesome host. We do appreciate the work that you all have done hosting us. So thanks again. For anybody that didn't hear the original announcement, this is a QR code that if you scan it will help us to answer the question of how much experience is in the room. I know we've lost a few folks needing to get out of town early, and so unfortunately I didn't get it on the screen earlier, but if you haven't had a chance, get it real quick before I change slides. And then the next one, another QR code, not quite as large, but this is a way that you can donate. We've had a few hiccups trying to get you information on how to donate to Bill directly. Patty has his address. Unfortunately, Patty's been sick the last couple of days, and I didn't want to bother her to try and get that address from her. Kathy is going to contact her, and she will have it. If you don't want to use the GoFundMe site to donate, you can mail something directly to him. Kathy will have that address on your way out. Just check with her, and she'll get it for you. I did donate using the GoFundMe, and one of the things that the way they've set it up, you can direct how much of the funds go to the GoFundMe administration, all the way down to zero. And so if that's an issue for you, like it kind of was for me, you know, I changed. There's a little slider where you can slide how much percentage of your donation goes to their administration, and so if that's your hiccup on that, feel assured. But I do want to show, we also have that card. I know we passed it around, but if for some reason you missed it, it's also at the registration desk with Kathy. I don't think she brought it in, so I think it's still over there. But get your name on it and send it to him. He's one of us. And so with that, I think I am going to, is it Dick? Are you the one moderating? Who's moderating? Is it you? Okay, so I'm going to hand it over to Dick, and we'll get started with our program. Thank you.
Oh, it is. All right, this morning we've got, we're going to focus on another alternate fuel, and it's going to be on hydrogen. And our first speaker is going to be Andrew Zdanowicz, if I got it right. And is Brett here?
Brett is not.
So Andrew will be doing a presentation on hydrogen powerhouse, so it's all yours.
Thanks very much.
There you go. I believe the clicker works. You can also use the arrows there.
Okay, awesome. Appreciate it. Okay, everybody hear me all right? Cool. So I'm Andrew Zdanowicz. I'm from Colorado State University. I work as a research engineer of types at the Energy Institute, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. I am here to talk to you kind of about hydrogen as an alternative fuel, and an alternative option to battery electric vehicles when trying to transition to these zero-emission fleets. I'm here today with one of our partners, Buford Bar, a New Day Hydrogen, and I just want to make a few statements about motivations and intentions ahead of time. So from my side, my job is primarily project execution and proposal writing for these federally funded projects. Buford is really in the hydrogen business here, and all I'm saying is that I make no money off the sale of hydrogen. Buford does. I'll try to kind of build your trust here over the opening slides of my presentation. But my interests really are attracting federal dollars to fund alternative energy research, right? And this partnership with New Day Hydrogen was really a way to do that. So without further ado, kind of get things started. Before I leave this slide, so this is our research facility at CSU. So this is a satellite campus called the Powerhouse, now part of the Energy Institute. So this building is pretty cool. It's up in Fort Collins, and it used to be the old municipal power plant for the city. It was commissioned in maybe 1935, 36, something like that, and served maybe 40 or 50 years as the city's main power source. And then it was decommissioned in the late 1980s. Our kind of founding fathers, Dr. Brian Wilson, included there, started a research lab based out of that old abandoned power plant. And ever since, we've kind of been studying these large-scale, power generation systems. So really, being an old power plant, our bread and butter here, or our specialty, right, is large-scale technology demonstrations, right? So, our facility has some unique characteristics, large foundation columns, a 2 megawatt grid interconnect, things that really enable high power engine testing. And over the last decade or so, 2 decades, I suppose, we've really been focused on methane emissions, right? So cleaning up industrial processes. Methane, of course, is a greenhouse gas in itself, and its emission is now heavily regulated by the EPA. And so, that's really been our primary focus here for the last 20 years, and now we're undergoing this transition into the hydrogen energy space. So a few of our flagship installations here, I've got a solar Centaur 40 gas turbine. It produces 3.2 megawatts, so it's the largest. It is the largest dedicated research engine of its type at a university level. So other universities have similar systems like this. Ours is the only one that isn't powering other facilities on our campus, right? So it's dedicated entirely to combustion and end-use research. Other things, we've got a Caterpillar 3516J. That is, a natural gas pumping engine that you'd see at a midstream station. A lot of natural gas work or methane emission mitigation work happening on that platform. And then our Nell C20 electrolyzer skid, which we'll talk about here in detail. But, my point with all of this is that I have a vested interest in hydrogen induced technology research, right? I need to produce hydrogen for my own research consumption, and I have a good feel of where the existing technologies are at, which I hope to communicate to you in a fair, unbiased manner, right? My intention is to have you guys walk away with a sense of where hydrogen technologies are at, both in the generation and end-use kind of realm, so that you can make better decisions for your fleet and what the future of zero emissions looks like going forward for you. So, I guess all I'm saying, we don't have to go through all of these. Industrial scale, everything in our building now is transitioning over to hydrogen end use and hydrogen combustion research that's associated with these existing systems. So, nice little graphic here. So I'm listing out my motivations here: produce hydrogen for our own consumption, research and demonstration of end-use hydrogen systems, develop and scale up of advanced electrolysis technologies. So we have electrochemists in-house that are developing new hydrogen generation technologies. Everything that I'm going to present to you today is commercially available, right? It's not a research project. It is ready to go, ready to be adopted by your fleet if you choose to do so. The real reason that I've been invited to speak here is that us, New Day Hydrogen, the rest of the CSU system, and NREL just partnered on a federally funded project called the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Grant. So I'm going to give kind of a quick overview of this coming project here as it relates to hydrogen fueling in Colorado, and then we can kind of talk about the implications in the applications there. So this Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Grant, Buford, I know I kind of threw you under the bus as just trying to sell hydrogen or whatever, but feel free to jump in if you think I'm missing anything here. So Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Grant, or CFI for short, right? There was roughly $620 million on the line. This was a funding opportunity announcement that came out of the federal DOT last year. And what we proposed here in partnership with New Day was a hydrogen fueling network that kind of ran the I-25 corridor here on the Front Range of Colorado. So we proposed installing these kind of micro hub hydrogen fueling stations in Fort Collins, Denver, and Pueblo, right, to kind of create this alternative fueling corridor. We're calling it High 25, as in hydrogen 25, which I think is pretty clever and I did not come up with. Anyway, so to give you some perspective again, right, at CSU here, me being predominantly interested in the end-use research, I selfishly pursued this grant so that I could afford to buy the equipment that produced hydrogen in bulk for my own consumption, right? It also is beneficial to us as a wider spread impact on the community, right? Most of our projects are pretty isolated before they go to commercialization. This is kind of the first of its type that I've worked on, where it's kind of a direct application of previous research, implementation of these stations. So we were awarded $9 million, roughly, a little under, to install these 3 stations and maintain them, right? So we're still not quite under contract, working through the contracting phases here and getting the project kicked off, hopefully in the next week. It's just contracts are out for signatures. Anyway, we are planning to have these sites fully commissioned by the end of 2025. And then this funding also supports the operations and maintenance, the station upkeep for a period of 5 years. And we'll talk about that here a little bit too, right? Because the reality is that in the state of Colorado, right, there is no hydrogen market right now. Nobody has or is buying hydrogen vehicles because there is no infrastructure, right? There is no infrastructure because nobody has vehicles, right? And so the intention here really of the CFI grant is to not only install those stations, but keep them alive and producing while these early adopters move in and start purchasing hydrogen, right? It's really to seed the market here. So a lot of funding in there to cover that 5-year period until 2031. Okay, let's talk real quick about hydrogen generation methods. I'm not going to get into any of the science, really. My 2 points on this slide, well, I guess one is that you can produce hydrogen through either, there are a number of ways of producing hydrogen. The 2 predominant methods are 1, steam methane reforming there on the bottom, which is taking natural gas, putting it through a reformation process to break apart mostly the methane, break that molecule apart, harvest the hydrogen that comes off, and then you're left with CO2. You can either emit that CO2 directly or you can sequester it, right? So there are all these colors of hydrogen, right? If you release that CO2 into the air, it's called gray hydrogen. If you capture that CO2, your GHG emissions go down, your greenhouse gas emissions go down, and so it's called blue hydrogen. What we are focused on, though, is electrolysis, which is the top there. So instead of splitting apart methane molecules, you're splitting apart water molecules, right? H2O. So, really, all I'm doing with these pictures in the top left, I'm saying that this technology exists. It's mature. We know how to do it. There are real commercially available products. And on the bottom, I'm just showing that there's a bunch of fancy science that goes into it, but basically it's you introduce high amounts of electricity into water, break that water apart, and again, just grab the hydrogen and go through a purifying process. But extremely high quality hydrogen, and it can be powered by renewable sources, right? If you have excess wind energy, right, you can run it right to a hydrogen electrolyzer and convert that electricity into hydrogen to store the energy in a chemical form. And so that here is kind of one of the main benefits of hydrogen, at least on the generation side. So we'll talk about the end-use benefits of hydrogen vehicles here as well. But from a generation side, producing hydrogen, right, we have to think about kind of the grid fluctuations on a day-to-day basis, right, of renewable production, of fluctuating electricity demand, right? And we are consistently left with pockets of excess renewable energy, I guess if you think about the load and the kind of unforeseen stresses that battery electric vehicles are putting on the grid right now, right? So, you've got, many new, members of the battery electric vehicle community that are, entering here onto the grid, stressing the grid, right? That creates serious peaking, right, for the demand of electricity. Hydrogen, and that demand for electricity is also fluctuating and uncontrolled, right? It comes down to an individual with an electric vehicle deciding to plug in at any random time, right? And there are ways that we can kind of normalize that demand or make it more uniform. But really the advantage of hydrogen on the production side is that we can choose when to produce. If we have excess power relative to the demand of electricity, we can send that power to our electrolyzers, produce hydrogen, make sure that the bias is towards renewable production instead of just burning coal to produce hydrogen. But it is much more controllable and predictable because it's at the commercial level, I suppose, and not down to an individual's choice to plug in their car. Okay, so what are we talking about for the stations here, right? So because the market for hydrogen does not exist in the state of Colorado, right, we need to make a reasonable entrance, right? We can't just build the biggest hydrogen production facility that we can and hope people will come, right? So Buford and his team here have really pioneered this modular, semi-permanent, containerized solution for on-site hydrogen generation, right? So we're not taking hydrogen from some production plant and bringing it to a fueling station. We're using electricity on site of that fueling station to split water molecules, perform this electrolysis, and then generate our own hydrogen there locally. So what these guys have come up with is a series of 3 containers that house all of the required equipment, right? One 40-foot connex, so what's a connex? It's like 10 foot by 8 foot, something like that. 40 by 8 by 8. So we've got 2 40-foot connex. One has all of the electrolyzers, all of the generation equipment. The other has compression and storage equipment, right? So, increasing the volumetric density of the hydrogen there, and storing it until customers come and get it, right? And then the last container there, that's kind of off to the left of my bottom right graphic, is a dispenser, right? So what the customer will actually pull up to, swipe their credit card, interact with, fill their car, right? So within these containers, right, it's a full independent, or mostly independent, production solution for hydrogen, right? All you need is 500 kilowatts of power loaded up. Water, how much water do you need? About 600 gallons a day of water. And that, gets you roughly 210 kilograms of hydrogen a day, right? And we'll talk about kind of what that means, but enough to support a small fleet of vehicles. We're not talking about, every truck running down I-25. We're talking about, these early adopters coming in with 4 or 5, medium-duty box trucks or a few Class 8 semis, and being able to support that fleet. So that's kind of our market entrance, is having 3 of these stations, and in their modular nature, in the low site requirements, right? You basically just need 1,000 square feet and some water and some power, make it pretty easy to scale up, right, as that demand grows. So what this kind of looks like, I guess, this is an older version that was originally installed in Washington, D.C., and was decommissioned maybe in 2016 or so. This is what we have at the powerhouse at my work. And it's a slightly different configuration, and it's obviously not fully commissioned there. This was when it arrived on site that I snapped a picture of it. But this kind of gives you an idea of scale, right? The right connex there is our generation equipment, our electrolyzer, and the left container is compression, storage, and dispensing. This is a slightly smaller installation. This will only produce about 65 kilograms a day, but this is what I'm going to be using to produce hydrogen for our own building, and then using it in tandem to be public-facing, right? Offer hydrogen to customers. We don't really need to talk about that. The point of this slide is basically that I'm going to have 2 tanks, one for powerhouse dedicated storage, and the other for customer use. And yeah, so I'll say some words about this real quick. So I just want to emphasize again the commercial availability of these, right? So the cabinets there on the left, that's our actual electrolyzer. This is purchased off the shelf, right? This is a NEL product, N-E-L, and there's a bank of rectifiers. There's a whole control system integrated, and a few electrolyzer stacks within that left cabinet, right? But this is the entire means of production for our building, right? So it's relatively small. That skid is maybe 15 feet wide, right? And that allows us to produce 65 kilograms a day. And you can just place a purchase order for it, and it'll show up in a few months, right? So don't think that this is some kind of sci-fi technology that we're talking about here. On the right, I've got a new hydrogen storage cube from Steelhead. That is, again, to just say, companies are making this stuff. You can have bulk storage on your site for minimal effort. You don't need a team of design engineers to figure this stuff out for you. You can just buy it off the shelf. This is a quick look inside of our compression and storage container. You're really just seeing a compressor. There's some hydrogen tanks in the back, but we can kind of discuss that if there's time here at the end and interest. I want to talk quick before we get into vehicles about our kind of intended market here with New Day Hydrogen, right? So, part of the issues that California has been seeing in their early implementation of hydrogen systems is that they've targeted the passenger market, right? Passenger vehicle market. So, I mentioned earlier about how, these individuals with battery electric vehicles can just kind of charge whenever they choose, right? It really comes down to user discretion. That, I think, that ability to choose in the unpredictable nature of when customers showed up to the hydrogen refueling sites in California was really to their detriment, right? Managing the supply and demand across, I think they have like 39 stations. It really just became a nightmare with people, showing up to hydrogen stations, having to wait for new deliveries, not being able to fuel their vehicles. What we're trying to do here in this initial phase, at least, is target kind of more of the commercial market, right? Fleet managers like yourselves, think businesses that run, you know, consistent routes, consistent local routes with medium box trucks, right? Think like New Belgium Brewing up in Fort Collins, right? Every day they load a box truck up with all of their beer, and they drive around to all the gas stations and liquor stores in town, and it's a consistent, predictable route, right? That's what we're targeting. There are other advantages, and I would like to convince you that hydrogen is not a replacement for electric vehicles, battery electric vehicles, but rather a complement to it. And we'll talk about the vehicle implications and the advantages with hydrogen in the heavier duty market here in a second. But last, to kind of close out this award portion of my talk here, there's also a substantial effort going on. You know, me at the university level, we are developing outreach programs to train, you know, the incoming workforce as well as displaced workforce for, you know, adopting these hydrogen systems. So I won't say too much more about that, but there are, you know, courses being developed, certificate courses as well for adult learners, but a lot of outreach activities that are happening here. Okay, so anyway, enough rambling. What does hydrogen offer you, right? As fleet managers, why do you care? Why would you choose to go the route of using a hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicle compared to, you know, a typical, you know, battery electric vehicle? And to talk about, you know, a common question here that we often receive, right, is the actual vehicle platforms here and what they consist of, right? So hydrogen is extremely flammable. You can burn it in an internal combustion engine. And there are, I think Toyota has a new hydrogen engine or something like that. But, you know, everything we're going to be talking about here today is on the fuel cell side of things. Hydrogen internal combustion engines, or ICEs, you know, one, since you're burning that fuel, you're not truly in the zero emission realm, right? Hydrogen flames are super hot. It oxidizes the nitrogen that's present in the air as it runs through the engine, right? Producing NOx, right? NOxes are heavily regulated, right? You also have much lower efficiencies. So, you know, you kind of, to talk about kind of energy densities that we're dealing with here, right? A typical passenger vehicle, you know, in a fuel cell implementation will have roughly like 5 kilograms of hydrogen in its tank. And it's an energy density issue in the sense that, you know, hydrogen is a really small molecule, and you got to compress it and reach pressures in your storage tanks that are upwards of, you know, 10,000 psi, right? We're compressing it until, you know, like really at the upper limits of what's mechanically possible. When you switch over to ICEs and you start burning that fuel instead of, you know, running it through a fuel cell, you take such an efficiency loss that, you know, you're reducing your range off that 5 kilograms by, you know, I don't know. You might get 30% the range that you would in a fuel cell electric vehicle. So really, I don't personally see hydrogen combustion engines really ever taking hold and becoming, you know, a common offering from manufacturers. Really, everything we're going to be talking about is fuel cell electric vehicles. So what's happening here is you're basically running your electrolyzer in reverse with a fuel cell, right? So you can split water apart with electricity, producing hydrogen. You can also form, this is a really simplistic view, but you can form water from an incoming hydrogen stream and, you know, produce electricity. It's not a reversible process. I don't want to make it seem that way, but that's kind of a layman's understanding of how a fuel cell generates electricity. It just reverses the process. Here, these operate similar to conventional hybrid vehicles as well. So you have a fuel cell, you have hydrogen as your main means of energy storage, but you also have the benefits of energy recovery during braking, right? For example, that a conventional hybrid would have, right, with just a normal IC engine. You can recover energy, you can increase your range in that way. What else do I have up here for? Yeah, the only drawback here is it's higher cost. It's not prohibitively expensive, and especially in the commercial sector, you're quickly going to make up that higher capital cost with reduced operating costs, just because you're going to be burning less fuel. So anyway, all that to say, fuel cell electric vehicles, forget about hydrogen ICEs, at least for now. So, advantages on the vehicle side, right? Hydrogen lends itself really well to heavy-duty applications, right? So, this is a slide that I borrowed from Buford here, but he's calling out the advantages, in several, different categories here. So one, let's just talk about power density for a second. If you were to try to build, a semi Class 8 truck and have it be completely electric, right, battery electric, you're going to fill a third of your trailer there with batteries. Hydrogen, being a lighter molecule, lighter means of energy storage, really keeps your gross vehicle weight down and allows you to, go further, haul more. It is really a much better fit than a battery electric vehicle for zero emission, heavy duty applications. Temperature is the other thing, right? So, battery electric vehicles, right? I mean, you know this with your phone. If your phone gets too hot, it's not gonna work. If it gets too cold, the lifetime of the battery goes way down. Same thing's true for battery electric vehicles. And hydrogen does not really have that problem, right? Because the energy is stored in a chemical form, you don't really have the same trade-offs with temperature as you otherwise would. So that's, excellent for ice road truckers and snowplow drivers, and it really carves out a space here in the zero-emission fleet for hydrogen vehicles to be a part. What else we got? Sorry. I think we covered most of that. Am I missing anything? Do you want to say some selling words? Okay. Okay, and the whole thesis of my talk here is that this stuff exists and it's ready for adoption. It's commercially available, right? So light duty, medium duty, heavy duty. Is Roy here yet from Rising? So Roy is a unique case in the state of Colorado here, in that he has 2 or 3 Nikola semi trucks. These on the right there. I believe you brought one today, didn't you? So check that out in the parking lot later, I guess. But from class 1 to class 8 here, we've got hydrogen vehicles, fuel cell electric vehicles, kind of spanning the entire spectrum here. So these are commercially available products. The medium duty space is still really being built out, I would say. So these vans are mostly, how would you say, like adapted, third parties buying these vehicles, converting them over to fuel cell electric vehicles, and then offering them for sale. But we have many, many options here, right? It's not sci-fi, it's just not here yet. regionally, it is not here yet because we don't have that infrastructure, right? So there are buses, there are, other Class 8s available, converted, what is that? Like a Class 7 truck, US hybrid. Again, this stuff is out there. And perhaps more relevant to you, there are vocational and off-road vehicles that are existing and out there. Most of these are smaller scale in production right now. Correct me if I'm wrong, I suppose, Buford, but many of these large automakers are teaming up with kind of smaller startups and bringing these products to life here. So really, any vehicle that you can think of, somebody either makes a commercially ready product or offers conversion services to convert it over to hydrogen. Okay, so I think I went way too fast here. But I do want to leave time for questions, and it is not often that I get to talk with folks like you, right? I'm mostly on the research side, and so one, I'm honored to be invited here to talk, and two, I'm very curious as to what the challenges that you guys have been encountering have been. I don't think anybody probably has hydrogen vehicles yet, but in terms of your map forward to reducing your greenhouse emissions, kind of what that looks like for you. I want to leave plenty of time for conversation here. Answers to the easy questions. When? So our stations will be fully commissioned and accessible by 2026. So the majority of next year we'll be building, we'll be permitting, we'll be placing those stations. The why we kind of went over here, right? The one thing I didn't touch on, and is a significant benefit, I just kind of blanked up here, is the refueling times, right? If you have a battery electric vehicle, that vehicle is going to sit on a charger for 5-6 hours at least until it's fully charged. With a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle, you can just fill it up in 15-20 minutes, right? It's not quite the refueling time of gasoline, but it's more reminiscent of that. Improving heavy-duty vehicle characteristics, better coupling with transient renewable sources or otherwise. And then your options, right? You have these products available. New Day Hydrogen would love to build you a local site there and own and operate that, sell you hydrogen. But anyway, I think that's about it. So I want to leave time here for questions. Buford, I don't know if you want to say anything to kind of supplement my presentation here. Sure.
So before we get into that, those of you that are on the 9 o'clock bus, Eric, Benjamin, Gary, Lawrence, Michael, the van is here. If you're still in here, about 10 minutes.
That was a really good presentation. Questions now just raise your hand up. We'll grab you a mic.
So in saltwater conversion or rolling freshwater?
People are working on saltwater. I think it's mostly on the alkaline cells. I'm not up on the times with saltwater conversion. For our skid, for our electrolyzers, we need to run it through a deionizer first. So it needs to be ultra pure water. And that is to prevent fouling of the catalysts in there. There's a lot of fancy metals that you can destroy with impurities. So.
Let me answer that a little bit differently.
Sure.
Purity level for the water, really you need me? I need a mic? Okay. The purity level for the water has to be very high, as Andrew indicated. We're actually in conversations with quite a few water treatment plants about using the gray water, the purple pipe coming out of that. So really we can use any level of water as long as it has consistent quality that we can address. Salt water is a challenge in regards to that. We're not quite there yet as an industry to get that economical, but in general, we can take almost any quality level as long as it has a consistent quality. Yeah. Oh, I mean, the reality for us as a society is we need water, right? It's one of the the problems we have as humans. We need water, and water becomes more and more scarce, especially when you're sitting here in the high desert. So if we can get down to the point where we're utilizing water that is not needed for human consumption, salt water, brackish water, those kind of things, that would be ideal. Agreed.
The other half of that is you're producing oxygen as well. Is there an effort to commercialize that or to capture, or is it just go?
It's a potential. Some people, it's a pretty common question that we get. The problem with that for us is the most ready place for that would be going into the medical environment, and the purity levels on the oxygen have to be so high that it actually adds significant cost to what we're doing.
Yeah.
So right now, we're emitting oxygen. So the only emissions from our, directly from our package itself is oxygen. We figured that would go in.
There are also really fun combustion things that you can do with enhanced oxygen streams. So our gas turbine work, some of that is, without going too far into the details, running heavy exhaust gas recirculation. So, recirculating the gas out of the exhaust, putting it back into the intake, and boosting the CO2 levels there to kind of better prime your package for carbon capture and sequestration. But in that scenario, hydrogen and oxygen in large quantities are super beneficial to stabilize the combustion. So anyway, I can see an electrolyzer kind of coupled with a stationary power generation system like that, where both hydrogen and oxygen are being utilized. But that part is still kind of sci-fi. So.
You threw a lot of numbers out there during your presentation. I really appreciate it. It's very informative, but somebody that's kind of new to the whole thing, that was a lot of shoving in of knowledge in a rather quick. I was wondering if somehow we can conceptualize this. Say, I'm thinking that hydrogen is the answer for heavy duty. I'm from Maryland. I can't see us doing a whole bunch of a battery electric Class 8 stuff, especially with the grid situation on the East Coast right now. So New Day makes these, for lack of a better word, plug-and-play hydrogen generators. Okay, we put it on the site. We need electric and we need water going to it. Yep. Okay, there's a certain capacity to what they have, like what you have right now. For, say, a fleet of 25 trucks, and at times these trucks are going to have to run 24 hours a day, when we're responding like here. When you have winter, Colorado's trucks are probably way more than 24 hours because of the kind of snow you guys get out here. But, what are is this whole system set up where, I see that it can produce so much per day. So to me, when you say that, it's 24 hours it takes to fill this tank.
Yeah,
so what are we looking at? Say like for 25 trucks in normal consumption. You see what I'm getting at is sort of, to sell this, it's, I've got to conceptualize in the sense that, okay, for a normal facility that we have, a normal maintenance facility, what is it going to take to, make this operational or functional for us?
So, I'm assuming everyone can hear me. The reality for us, and Andrew said it, is we're starting small because that's really where the market is aligning, right? We'd be delighted if you'd come tomorrow and say, we're going to buy 25 vehicles and we want a fueling for that. I don't think that's how most people are going to move. I think it's going to be 1s, 2s, 3s, 5s type thing. So from that point of view. So put it into context. We're talking generating 210 kilograms over a 24-hour period. So we talk in kilograms just to confuse the hell out of everybody. So put it in context. A Class 8. Class 8 will probably take somewhere between 50 and 70 kilograms on a fill-up to go 400 miles. So in general, if your trucks are running all day, they come back empty, then you're talking a station that could take somewhere between 3 to 5 heavy duty trucks. That's what we're selling as far as our base package. Moving down in the vehicle classifications, we can handle probably 10 to 15 on the medium duty side. So you're right. If you've got 25 dump trucks / snow plows that are out there, so you're class 6 on up, vehicle size, our station alone can't handle that. But we can handle the first several that come in there. And then for, the way that we transition is we can stack stations to be able to align that.
Does that alter the footprint, or can I go up?
Now, unfortunately, I use the term stack, and it's a little misleading. I can't go up. Yeah. So it's basically they are set, basically back to back, if you want to think of it that way. But it's still a pretty small footprint. Our base station we can put it in about 1,000 square feet. So we can layer it pretty easily. The turning radius for the vehicles is so much bigger than the property we need.
Is there a quick and easy conversion? The range 400 miles, that's great, but the people I've worked with, battery electric, I'm not so concerned about how far it can go.
How long?
We found from New York City with their electric Packers, it's how long can it go?
Yep.
It's time on task, because I'm not just driving now.
Yep.
I'm adding load, I'm increasing the duty cycle of the truck, I'm doing a lot of different things, but is there any thought to, is there that kind of, that's the economics of what we're looking at. It's like, okay, I can go 400 miles.
Yep.
Okay, great, but how long can I push snow for? Or how long can I remove debris from a hurricane?
Yep.
Or how long can this thing work at full capacity before, with the AC on and everything else?
Well, so the reality is, that's the reason we all talk mileage is because that's easy to conceptualize, and it's pretty consistent over that. So the amount of hours that you can operate is obviously highly dependent upon exactly what you're doing and the loads off of that. I can tell you, we brought Roy was generous enough to allow us to bring his truck to the Denver Auto Show. But 2 years prior to that, we had actually brought a bus. So we're the fools that bring different kind of vehicles to auto shows. But we sat that bus. It was outside that year. We sat that bus in the heat, running AC the entire day, and pretty much the fuel gauge didn't move. So hydrogen is well situated to be able to operate in those exact situations that you're talking about. And I do want to say, Andrew said it well, but I want to reiterate, I'm not here to bash battery electric vehicles. I think they're really good vehicles. They are very efficient vehicles. But the reality is there are use cases they simply don't align well with. So like you have gasoline and diesel today, I think you're going to have battery electric, fuel cell electric tomorrow. So the fuel cell electric tends to lean pretty heavily towards those diesel functions that you use today. So I don't know if I answered your question completely there, but.
No, but it's the way I'm thinking about it to further confuse things is it's kilograms per kilowatt of demand.
Yep.
Okay, turning our horsepower back into kilowatt to try to figure out how this works for us.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. It's probably a way that we need to switch the focus from a mileage, to your point, to a kilowatt output. So it's a good point.
Thanks.
So are you saying the more load we put on this vehicle, it like on the farm, I got a combine.
Yep.
And the more load I put on it, the more fuel to use.
Yeah,
So
just like you
It
would
won't
with
use
your
any
diesel.
more. It won't use any more hydrogen. The more load you put on it.
Oh, no, it will.
Okay.
It will. All I was saying is putting into context with that bus story was, we sat there under some load. Obviously, an air conditioning load isn't equivalent to a combine load. But under that situation, we sat it there the entire day, had the AC running the entire day, and it basically didn't pull off. You didn't see.
But there's not much load on AC.
There isn't a huge load on AC. You're right. But, running it all day in the heat, and we really didn't see the fuel gauge move at all. So, it's pretty efficient under those situations. So I don't want to imply in any way that you're, if you have a load on it, you are using energy. But it's pretty efficient, especially when it's a non-drivetrain use.
So our trucks have 80-gallon tanks, and so that's $300 a day to fill up?
Yep.
What would
All right, now he asked the question that's on everybody's mind is, okay, what's the cost? Andrew made reference to the efficiencies relative to a fuel cell. So in general, and using simplistic math, because that's how my brain works, roughly, when you're talking anywhere up to a medium duty, heavy duty, the math is a little different, but in a medium duty range size, the fuel cell is roughly twice as efficient as an internal combustion engine. The amount of energy in a kilogram of hydrogen is roughly equivalent to the amount of energy in a gallon of gasoline. So on that gallon of gasoline, you can go twice as far because of those efficiency levels. So roughly what we're looking at is we think we can get the price of hydrogen. This is without grants, without incentives. This is simply basically off of our business model. We think we can get it down to below $5 a gallon equivalent. I know right now diesel's sitting at what, 350-ish range, but one of the issues with diesel, with gasoline, is it does this, right? Constantly. We anticipate that with electric loads, you're going to have a lot more consistent understanding of what your costs are going to be. But our goal is to get down to roughly that $5 a kilogram. We see that as being roughly that point of equivalency with diesel. And if we add grants and incentives on top of that, we think we can drive it lower. But really what's powering that is the utilization levels. So high utilization levels, if I've got a station that's being used, I can drive down the cost of hydrogen. If I have a station that's not being used, the whole concept of let's build a big station and hope people show up, then my price of hydrogen goes up because I'm simply underutilizing the station.
So what's in that $5 is just electricity and water? Is that, or are you talking about the
electricity, water, and basically the return on our capital?
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. So the other question I have is a lot of us in here are used to being focused on maintenance issues.
Yep.
I know nothing about fuel cells and the kinds of maintenance that you would
well, then
expect.
they're perfect.
They're perfect. No maintenance at all.
No, good question in regards to that. The reality is what we're anticipating is a fuel cell electric vehicle is an electric vehicle. So there is no internal combustion, as Andrew said. You don't have those anywhere near the number of moving parts that you have in a modern day diesel or gasoline. So what you should see is those maintenance costs should go down and go down significantly relative to your expenditures for a gasoline or diesel. Now the reality today, we're not quite there. We really need the system to scale up to get those benefits. But just conceptually, if you think about it, it's like, yes, it should be less. And I think what you're starting to see in the California market, which is really the only mature hydrogen transportation market, you're starting to see with those larger fleets, they're starting to see the benefits of those reduced costs on their maintenance.
I think I'm focused more on the cell itself. Is there anything that you do with the cell? It's a black box that you never touch after you own it.
It's pretty much a black box that you never touch. It does have a life on it, just like a battery does, but it tends to be 10, 15 plus years in regards to that. The way that I look at this is the confidence of the vendors is driven by the warranty, right? So the warranty levels that they're putting out there are equivalent to the warranty levels that you would get with a diesel or gasoline, vehicle.
How many?
So does it degrade over its life, or is it work, and then at the end of its life, it stops?
It will degrade, but it's a very low slope on the degradation. So you're not going to see a huge. It's not going to be one of these precipitous drop type things. It's a slow degrade over time.
But what happens at the end of its life? Then
So-
it just stops working, or you decide it's degraded too much?
You're going to decide it's degraded too much. You know, like I said, that's why the vendors are looking at it as, you know, hey, this is our point in time. Just like when you get a you know, diesel, you know, engine, you know, typically they say, you know, depending upon the vehicle, you know, anywhere from 200,000 plus miles is typically your life of an anticipated engine. Reality, you may be getting twice as much on that. You're going to see the same thing with a fuel cell as well, but you know, they've got their anticipated lifespans on them.
Dependent on the quality of the hydrogen, or not so much?
The quality, Andrew made reference to fouling of the electrolyzer. Same thing happens with a fuel cell as well. So if the quality of the hydrogen is bad, just like you would get in a gasoline or diesel, if you have bad gas or bad diesel, same thing. If you foul that, that's a bad situation to be in. So that's my job, to make sure that doesn't happen.
How many of your base size stations can you operate with an average size windmill?
I don't know the output of an average sized windmill, to be honest with you. Andrew made reference that it's a 500 kilowatt load is the load that the station requires. Unfortunately, I can't put it into the context of a windmill. I simply don't know that. I can tell you this, we can direct connect into renewables. Our base model is assuming that we're connecting into the grid, just because that pretty much allows us to be almost anywhere. Most of our conversations with the grid have indicated if you're below a megawatt, they're not overly concerned. You go over a megawatt on a load, they get really nervous talking to you. So I apologize, I can't answer that question.
For island applications, though, you know, where you're not tied into the grid, and you have, you know, what is a windmill? Is that like 1.5 megawatts? What are the big GE ones? I think you could power like 3 or 4 stations, you know, depending on your wind load. But these there you go. So
Google has answered.
6 stations, and there are performance benefits with the type of electrolyzers that you know, we use. In that you can ramp them up and ramp them down just fine. If the wind, you know, big gust comes through, you're going to convert that wind gust into hydrogen with relatively high efficiencies. You don't have to wait for the system to warm up or anything. It's more of like a direct conversion. So.
Fuel cell
Yeah.
reaches its lifespan, is it replaceable, or is it cost prohibitive to throw it? What's the, you know, like you said, a million miles on a diesel motor, you throw it away, put another motor in, but is a fuel cell cost prohibitive? So you can just change the fuel cell, or does that not, that doesn't work in this technology, you gotta change the vehicle?
No, you can change the fuel cell. You know, that's part of the concept. They're still working that, to be honest with you.
I know this is all early questions,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you guys think way down the road.
You know, I think the reality right now is, with where we are with the technology, it's going to be more expensive than an engine swap out at this point. The intentions are, you know, you have to remember, we're very early in this process. We do intend that with scale, as you know, as we get more and more of these vehicles on, as the vendors get better about, you know, producing these, increasing the efficiencies, increasing the lifespans, you're going to see those costs go down significantly. But yeah, the concept is you can pull it out. Battery electric theoretically is the same thing, but that so much of the value of the vehicle itself is tied up in the battery that it's a pretty significant cost impact. You're not looking at the same thing for a fuel cell, but it would be more than an engine swap.
So we work in extreme conditions and have, you know, we use corrosive materials all the time. Will that affect it a lot? Well, it was mainly the extreme conditions.
Don't pour the corrosive materials on the fuel cell. That would be a first step. So when you talk extreme, are you talking temperatures? Are you talking?
Yeah, like low temps, and
Yep.
you know, we're pushing ice all the time, snow and ice, and they build up.
Yep. So Andrew made reference to the you know, to the temperature extremes. especially in regards to battery electrics. Battery electrics don't like, the temperature extremes. Fuel cells really aren't nearly as impacted by that. So, that shouldn't be an issue at all, as you're dealing with that. Corrosive environments, I don't know how to answer that one, to be honest with you.
Corrosive just meaning like the salts? Yeah, salts. You're not gonna have a problem with that.
Yeah, you shouldn't.
Yeah, no. Yeah, coming from the gas industry, and like if you're pulling that in your fuel cell, like it's gonna destroy. But ice or salts.
So I know you guys are not truck manufacturers now, but most of the stuff that like on the truck out there, fuel cells and everything else, all the auxiliaries is all ran off of electricity.
Yep.
We run a lot of hydraulics, and takes a lot of horsepower for hydraulics, and that. And has anybody out there been putting, they are capable of PTO as far as I know. And how are they going to be driving that? Is it going to have to be on an electric motor to drive our hydraulics? It's up to 30, 40 horsepower for that.
Yeah, so Andrew pointed towards, some of the construction equipment that's out there, especially the equipment that's moving large containers with imports and such. Those are all based off of hydraulics as well. But you're right, it's basically driving an electric motor, whether you're driving it directly off the drive shaft itself, or whether you have an ancillary motor. But it's going to be all fueled by the hydrogen, itself. So you'd have an ancillary electric motor to be able to do that.
I have a question about the cost of the station that you were talking about. Just the one station that's capable of fueling, I think you said somewhere around 5 vehicles per day. What kind of infrastructure cost are you looking at for that station?
So typically the approach that we take, and I'm not trying to do a sales pitch for New Day, though I'd love to do a sales pitch for New Day. Our approach is that we own and operate the station, so we're not necessarily in the business of selling the asset, because we look at it as we're funding the capital for that. It's one less headache that you have to worry about. But the stations themselves can run you, depending upon quite a few variables, but can be in the $3 million-ish range, to put something like that in play.
Before we start with the next question, if you guys have any more questions about the infrastructure buildup or the technology in itself, that's these two gentlemen. We have other gentlemen coming up on the next panel that will probably be better about real-world applications, how the trucks do in weather conditions and situations, and the automotive technology that's coming up behind that, and a few of those other logistical issues that I know everyone's asking questions about. So there's a lot of stuff coming up, and these guys are going to be part of that panel as well. They're no one's going to be going back and forth on different ideas and technologies. It's just that these guys have a better basis on production and the technology behind the production, and the group coming up is going to be more based in expert knowledge based on how to get hydrogen to where you've got it and what kind of vehicles are available.
I have one question. You have a fleet of trucks come in, they refuel, they sit on the yard, not only for maybe 24 hours, they may sit for a week charged. Is there any does it matter whether they're full or they're empty FARs? I mean, is there like shelf life FARs? Once they're full, the fuel cells are full, there's not any problems with they jump in it FARs a week from now and FARs go out down the road?
No. Yeah, as Andrew indicated, you're holding the energy in a chemical basis, so it can store it, basically indefinitely.
Okay.
Yeah. The temptation is to go to liquid hydrogen, so you can liquefy hydrogen and get higher energy densities that way. But the issue is, as the tanks aren't perfectly insulated, heat makes its way into the tank. That hydrogen vaporizes, pressures rise beyond what the tank can handle, and then it's vented. So if you have liquid hydrogen vehicles, that they can't sit, essentially. But gaseous hydrogen, what we've been talking about today, you can fill
Is the final solution strictly going to be production at the end user, or is there going to be manufacturing and distribution of hydrogen?
So I guess it depends on what you mean by final. The DOE came out with their Hydrogen Hub program, which was scale. It's really setting these up at large scale. There were 7 of them across the U.S., I think. And these are billion-dollar projects with the intention of setting up large hydrogen generation. The thought is large means scale should drive down costs. So ultimately, once those are up and running, the reality of delivered hydrogen, very analogous with our delivered gasoline, delivered diesel, it definitely goes up. Right now, where we are, delivered hydrogen is a challenge. If you look to the California market, almost every one of those stations is based off of delivered hydrogen. Almost every one of those stations has run dry at one point in time or another because of supply chain issues. That's why we lean towards, if we generate it on site, I can eliminate that link in the supply chain. I can control that. I can therefore enhance the reliability of the stations to a certain extent. But longer term, down the road, as those big hubs come up and running, as the cost of hydrogen from them is driven down, then you get to the point where delivered hydrogen starts to make a lot more sense. We're not there yet.
Are electric generators considering storing their energy through hydrogen? Where they have
Stationary power
excess
applications?
energy?
Yeah. Yes. Right. And that kind of goes back to what I talked about with, peak shaving or, unload, broadening. There's another term. But yeah, basically dealing with the fluctuations in the grid demand and the renewable sources that you have available. Yes, people are looking heavily into kind of storing that energy temporarily in the form of hydrogen.
Utah is actually doing that right now, where they're basically taking renewable power from Wyoming, converting that into hydrogen, storing that on site, and then when it's needed, they'll bring it back, actually use it to generate power, and they'll send it all to Southern California.
Yeah.
So, I think this gentleman over here's got.
No, just ask my question, never mind.
Oh. Sorry about that.
Question. Being from Arizona and knowing that Nikola and the hydrogen industry is just really ramping up in the Metro Phoenix area on the desert floor, solar applications to create hydrogen, it seems to me that would be a pretty simple solution. Can you speak to that?
Sure. It is, right? It's just another form of electricity that's coming in.
So think of hydrogen like this. Hydrogen is basically, in essence, a way to store energy. It is, in essence, a large battery.
Right. But you can use solar to manufacture it.
Sure you can.
Yeah, because let's say at Buckeye, that'd be the west side. I think they've got like a 300-acre hydrogen farm that they're building, along with the truck manufacturer there.
Yep.
All right, that's good. That's good.
I know, just as a comment, when I was working with Condot, we can go back at least a decade and a half with Clean Cities, and Jim can probably even update. We've been running a hydrogen bus that long, and that has gone exceptionally well, looking at as far as the longevity of the piece. Decade and a half, and that thing's still going. Clean Cities had some small vehicles. The biggest thing at that time, of course, was the cost of the asset. They got a grant to do it, but it did show that that type of product has a place, and at least what we could see for big equipment, that was one of the fuels that I felt that was going to be for the future, now we're talking a decade and a half ago, versus other alternate fuels, hydrogen would be the way to go. And I'm glad to see there's more on that, because at least some of the questions, at least something we can quantify that as far as the equipment goes, decade and a half, no problem. Any other questions? They said, we're going to have another group coming up, and they're probably going to be able to touch upon a lot of the questions you may have, so.
Yeah, we can even probably bring them up now to start
Yeah.
into that.
I just got one question, I just wondered if I don't know. So how much water does it take in this process? How much water does it take in this process to create the same amount of 1 gallon of fuel? And is it reusable? Is it a one and done? We pump it out and the water's gone, or do we just recycle and
Now,
continue to use the same amount of water?
yeah, roughly it takes about 3 gallons per kilogram of hydrogen is the easy answer for that. As far as can we recycle it, we're not destroying the water in the process. If you think about it, we're cracking it, as Andrew indicated, to create hydrogen. When we put it in the vehicle, it actually recombines with oxygen, so the only direct emissions from those vehicles is water vapor. So that same water that we took to create hydrogen comes back into the system. However, it's not, I can't capture it because it's in that vehicle, so it's going out into the atmosphere. It is a circular, but it's not one of those direct capture, direct reuse type of a situation.
So as it goes through your process, I guess, for lack of words, we've got a hose coming in, feeding your machine, there's gotta be a byproduct of that going back out, right? Or are we just dispersing water that's already been cracked and it's not, we can't use that again?
No, so what ends up happening, when we crack it, the water at that point has turned into hydrogen and oxygen. The water as a physical entity no longer exists. When we put it into the vehicle, the hydrogen, what it does, it actually draws in oxygen from the atmosphere. In the process of the fuel cell, it actually recombines the two, so that emissions from the vehicle itself is that water vapor. So we've cracked it, we've made it go away temporarily, but it comes back into the system as the exhaust out of the fuel cell. One thing I'd like to say is we'll be around for a while, so we definitely would be willing to participate in the panel, but if you have questions, feel free to just grab us later on. We'd love to talk about it with you.
I got a question for you. When you talk about quality of water, fresh water, you have far as your local water supply that may have far as, treatments far as through a treatment center, or just regular water coming from the well,
Yep.
whether it's hard water, that sort of thing far as, and you're saying about far as these cells, far as if you want to prolong the far as the life of the cell, the more pure water you get, the better far as more life you get out of your cells. So do you have a process where, okay, far as if it comes from the ground, it's hard water, it's got a lot of minerals, do you distill it or use reverse osmosis system far as there on the site to distill your water far as whether it's far as, steam type, or where you have just pure water, no minerals, no nothing? Is that something that far as you've looked at to see to have better quality water?
So our system at CSU has an integrated RO system, reverse osmosis, that deionizes the depleted water. So we're just taking it out of the tap, and we have the integrated system that's checking the water quality before it's passing through the water. Yep, exactly. Mineral deposits, ensuring that basically the water going to the electrolyzer stack is only water. I think molecular, I think to Buford's point about the gray water sources, there's still treatment processes that need to be upstream of the electrolyzer. But that can all be integrated into the system.
Yeah, that's part of the station itself. Like I said, we simply need a consistent quality. So I can design that upfront, that reverse osmosis filtration, whatever's necessary based on that quality level. But we build that into the station itself.